Hello, I'm Andrew Mishlove. Welcome back to How to Win a Drunk Driving Case, a guide for the layperson. We are still talking about the 7 key factors in drunk driving defense. In this session, we'll talk about the chemical test. That's obviously a critical factor. Now, many people believe that if a blood test or a breath test comes back over the legal limit, that's really proof positive of guilt and the case can't be won and it shouldn't be fought. Now, sometimes that's true. Sometimes the evidence is just piled up against you and the case needs to be settled. But many times, the case ought to be fought because blood tests and breath tests can be wrong. Now, for example, in a breath test, the government has to prove that the breath test machine was properly operated, that it was operated by a licensed qualified person, and that it was in proper working order at the time of the test. Now, that's just the beginning. Because even if all those things are true, a breath test can still be wrong. Breath tests can be wrong because of radio frequency interference. For example, if there's a police radio being used in the vicinity of the machine. Breath tests can be wrong because of mouth alcohol contamination. That's if somebody belches or burps within the 20 minutes or so prior to giving the breath sample. Breath tests can be wrong if the person giving the breath sample has what's called gastroesophageal reflux disease or chronic heartburn. That can cause a contamination of the breath sample. Breath tests can be wrong if the subject giving the breath has a fever. Breath tests can be wrong when administered to women because women's physiology is different. There are so many reasons why a breath test could be wrong. If you feel that you were sober and you were unimpaired and a breath test says otherwise, I would believe you before I would believe the breath test machine. Now, a lot of people think that a blood test is somehow super scientific and much better than a breath test. Some people even think that when the police or a hospital person takes your blood, that blood is then hand-delivered to a laboratory where a technician is waiting to test it, that your blood sample is taken and tested by a person in a white lab coat, and that the test result is then recorded, and then the result is delivered to the prosecutor, and so on. And really, that's not what occurs. In Wisconsin, something like 25,000 blood tests a year are done. It is, as they call it at the laboratory, a high throughput operation, which means it's basically an assembly line. There are lots of things that can go wrong with a blood test. For example, the vials, the test tubes themselves that are used to take your blood can be out of date or out of their freshness. They can be contaminated, they can be unsterile. That can cause a false high test result. The manner in which your blood is drawn can be done in a way that doesn't ensure the sterility of the sample, and that can cause a false high test result. In Wisconsin, it's very rare that the blood is refrigerated after it's been drawn in the 3 to 4 days that it takes to deliver it to the laboratory. That can cause a false high test result. There's preservative in the sample. The vials themselves contain a preservative. It's really important that that preservative be mixed in the sample properly in order to ensure an accurate test, and that's often not done. And on and on. There are very many reasons why a blood test could be wrong. So even if a breath test or a blood test says that you're over the legal limit, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If you feel that you were sober and unimpaired, and if you didn't have too much to drink, and if there's a breath test or a blood test that says otherwise, you should contact a skilled, experienced, and knowledgeable attorney to evaluate your situation.